Stop leeching off me, you useless thing. For over 20 years, I believed I had devoted myself to my husband, Thomas. Yet, this is what Thomas really thought of me. I wasn't leeching off him. I was merely devoted to him. But I can't put these thoughts into words. As my strength drains away, Thomas continues. Now that Richard is a working adult, you've got no reason to leech off me, right? But... Quiet. I don't want to hear your excuses. Thomas raises his voice. Oh, I can't do this anymore. My feelings will never reach him. At that moment, I hear something snap inside me. It's the sound of the thread of love that connected our hearts, breaking. At the same time, my feelings for him begin to fade. We were husband and wife until just now, but now he feels like a stranger. He had been using me from the start. He never loved me. Otherwise, he wouldn't blatantly cheat and try to kick me out. I don't care what happens to such a man. No, I must bring him down thoroughly. With my mind made up, I lift my face and stare intently at him. My name is Elizabeth. I'm a 50-year-old housewife, married to Thomas for 25 years. Our son Richard, born a few years into our marriage, graduated from college and started working this year. Now my childrearing days have come to an end, I can finally do what I want. That's what I'm thinking now. But there's one problem. It's my relationship with Thomas. He is neither a good husband nor a good father. In fact, it's hard to find anything good about him. He cheats, and he doesn't properly contribute to the household expenses. Please, at least bring in enough for the living expenses. Huh? Don't get cocky when you're living off me. That's always his response. Maybe it's hopeless. Should I consider divorce? Lately, I've been thinking about it more and more. But I can't easily bring myself to mention divorce. The truth is, his father, Joseph, who is currently hospitalized and in poor health, entrusted Thomas to my care. I have to be grateful to Joseph and bear it as long as I can. His words can't be ignored. But the desire to divorce is strong. Caught between these conflicting emotions, I find myself reminiscing about happier times before our marriage. The trigger for that past happiness was a misfortune that befell my father, David. My family runs a small eatery. My father was in charge of cooking, and my mother served the customers. Needless to say, the food was delicious. But my father was incredibly bad at business. His dream was to feed delicious food to the customers. As many people as possible. A noble idea, I think. But that was the only thing he focused on in running the eatery. So he doesn't really think about profitability. Profit didn't matter as long as the customers were satisfied. That was his way of doing business. Obviously, it wasn't profitable. Consequently, our family finances were always tight. Nevertheless, as a child, I was proud to see the satisfied customers. So I never interfered with my father's business. However, during my college years, a crisis struck. The company supplying ingredients to our eatery went bankrupt due to unforeseen circumstances. We've already paid this month's bill. If this continues, we might have to close our restaurant. Our situation was already difficult. There was no extra money to spare. Seeing my parents so upset made me anxious, but as a college student, there wasn't much I could do. And it was unlikely that the bankrupt company could refund. Our only option seemed to be closing our eatery. That's when a regular customer of the eatery said, "Closing this eatery? It's too good for that. What a waste. But the company supplying us has gone bankrupt, and now we're in debt. Then let me help you personally, and you can revive the eatery with that." The regular, truly lending the money immediately to my father. "You've saved us. We'll definitely repay you. Don't worry about the money for now. Just keep making delicious meals." Saying that, the man left the shop. Afterward, my father started dealing with a larger food wholesaler, which offered ingredients at a cheaper rate. Fortune seemed to smile upon us, and our family's eatery was saved from bankruptcy. About a year later, I went with my father to return the money to that regular customer. While my father and the man talked, a young man approached me. "It seems you've borrowed money from my father." Listening to him, I learned that he was the son of the man who lent us money. His name is Thomas, and he works for his father's company. "You're beautiful. How about going out with me sometime?" "Me? Go out with you? Why not?" "Think of it as a way to say thanks for the loan." It's true that we were helped by the loan. But my father had already properly thanked him. "I don't feel obliged to go that far," but as I thought this, Thomas whispered to me, "The daughter of an eatery owner is ungrateful." I could spread that around, you know. But that's... I couldn't talk back. Even if he did spread rumors, I don't think it would harm me. But it could trouble my father. And what would the customers think? With these thoughts, I couldn't refuse his offer. I don't like it, but I'll tolerate it this once. With that thought, I went out with him. But it turned out to be more fun than I expected. He was interesting to talk to, and he knew lots of places to go. The restaurants he chose were all tastefully picked. Despite my initial bad impression, he might be a good person after all. Maybe it was wrong to think that way. I soon found myself being asked out by him. "I have fun when I'm with you." "I have fun too. It is my first time that I can think about marrying." "If that was to you who are serious and good girl." Swayed by his simple words, I started a relationship with him, considering marriage. After that, he continued to guide me in various ways. Eventually, a few years later, I found myself married to him. Of course, I never thought at the beginning of our marriage that it was all a trap by him. He seemed genuinely kind, and I felt loved by him. But it was all a lie. As soon as we got married, his attitude changed drastically. "Here, this is my salary for the month. Manage it well." I opened the envelope he handed me. It was a salary statement. The salary itself was transferred to the bank, so it wasn't strange to receive only the statement. What struck me as odd was that the statement was handwritten. Nowadays, it's almost unheard of. But when I got married, 25 years ago, it was a time when personal computers were just becoming widespread, so a handwritten statement wasn't out of place. "There's over $1,000, so it should be enough, right?" I murmured to myself, trying to be convinced. I managed our life with that small amount of money. As our marriage continued, I gradually felt something was off. It was his lifestyle. He left home at a fixed time every morning. But his return was never at a set time. It varied day by day. "I'm busy with various jobs as my father's successor." "Then, could you call before coming home?" "Stop nagging." "All right, I'll call," he shouted. His attitude made me feel even more uneasy. Maybe he's out playing around. Perhaps he even has an affair. I had these thoughts, but I was too scared of his shouting to confront him. In the end, I couldn't say anything, despite my doubts about his behavior. Eventually, our son Richard was born. I thought maybe he'd change a bit with a child. But he remained the same. Looking back, I think that's when I started considering divorce. Then, when Richard was about middle school age, I got a call from my mother while I was out shopping for dinner. "What? Dad's in the hospital." It was news of my father's hospitalization. I rushed to the hospital. "Mom's just exaggerating." My father laughed heartily. I felt relieved. But in that moment, I remembered something and my heart leaped. "Oh no! I forgot to contact Thomas." By then, it was too late. My mobile phone was filled with countless calls from him. When I called back in a hurry, his displeased voice came through. "Where are you? What are you doing? Hurry back and make my dinner." "I'm sorry. My father." "Huh? Your father? Your own father?" Thomas asked in a slightly harsh tone. I answered in a small voice. "Yes. He was suddenly hospitalized." "Your father has nothing to do with it. You are my wife." I closed my eyes in fear at his shouting. I'm terrified of his loud voice. But I couldn't just let it go without responding. I braced myself and retorted. Isn't it natural to worry about one's father? That should be okay, right? Shut up. Don't talk back to me. No, I will say this. You would rush to your own father's side, wouldn't you? When I asked this, he suddenly fell silent. Putting himself in my shoes must have struck a chord. I thought so, but his reply was beyond my imagination. Huh? Even if my father was hospitalized, I'd ignore it. After all, I wouldn't be troubled if he wasn't around. I was speechless. This has to be a lie. That's what I thought, but I couldn't deny it. After much hesitation, I had said this to him. I'm not like you. Sorry, but eat out tonight. That was all I could say, my maximum effort. I hung up the phone, still in a daze. Since that incident, I truly couldn't believe him anymore. It was then that I finally realized that the happy times before our marriage were all an illusion. I see. He wanted a housekeeper, not a wife. Saying it out loud made me sad. But I couldn't just stay sad. That's right. If I'm going to divorce, I need to prepare. I started to prepare for the divorce. And then, a few years passed. This time, Thomas's father, Joseph, was hospitalized. And his condition was quite serious. He might not be able to leave the hospital, the doctor had said. I relayed Joseph's condition to Thomas. But Thomas remained unbothered. Does it mean it'll cost money? It's not the time to worry about money, don't you understand? I get it. I'll talk to my brother. Thomas contacted his brother James. James is married but doesn't have children. So Thomas suggested to James that he might be able to bear the hospital expenses. Can you pay for it? We have Richard and Elizabeth, and it's tough for us. He spoke as if it was someone else's problem. It reminded me of the time my father was hospitalized. It seemed he really didn't care about Joseph. I couldn't take it anymore. Enough. I'll figure something out and pay for Joseph's hospital bills. Don't forget what you just said. Thomas shouted. I nodded firmly. In the end, my words triggered us taking on the burden of Joseph's hospital expenses. Also, due to his illness, Joseph stepped down from his position as the president. And Thomas took over as the president. Regardless, Thomas didn't like that I had spoken up. Since then, he blatantly stopped coming home. Even when discussing Richard's future plans. Thomas ignored my calls and didn't return home. Dad's not coming home again today. I'm sorry, Richard. I'm causing you trouble. It's okay, I don't care about Dad. But I want to go to a university in Boston. That's right. Don't worry about the tuition, I'll manage it somehow. Soon after, Richard's enrollment in a Boston university was confirmed. Naturally, Thomas didn't see Richard off. Once Richard moved to Boston, the house suddenly became quiet. By then, Thomas was only coming home about once a week. There's also Joseph's hospital fees, could you transfer a bit more? Huh? I've already transferred over half of my salary. It should be enough for you alone. The amount Thomas transferred was just a little money. Clearly, it was only a fraction of his salary. Saying over half was definitely a lie. I knew that. But I didn't have the energy to complain. Years passed, and I received news that Richard had found a job. Richard has got a job now, it's probably a good time to talk about divorce. In these years, I had prepared for the divorce. It was just a matter of timing. When and where should I say it to avoid any trouble? Such thoughts constantly occupied my mind. It's not even about not wanting to cause a scene. I laughed at myself sarcastically. Then one day, I had been to visit Joseph. After chatting with Joseph as usual, I returned home. Reaching the entrance, I was startled. For some reason, the front door was unlocked. Could it be a burglar? Tentatively, I peeked inside the house. Then I heard the sound of the TV and Thomas's laughter coming from the living room. So Thomas was home. Relieved, I entered the living room. There, Thomas was watching TV, laughing loudly. "You were home." "Yeah, I thought I'd tidy up the house a bit." "Tidy up?" His words made me look around. On closer inspection, some items in the room were missing. "Wait, it looks like some things are missing." "Yeah, I threw them out." "Your stuff." "Threw out? My things?" Shocked, I hurried back to my room. The room was empty. No computer, no TV, not even my favorite cup. Even the bed was gone. "What's the meaning of this?" "I don't need them anymore, so I threw them out." "Don't need them? What am I supposed to do now?" I shouted, and Thomas frowned. Then he looked away and sighed. "I guess. I'm tired of supporting you." "What are you saying? I'm your wife." I retorted, and Thomas seemed irritated. He suddenly raised his voice. "Do I have to spell it out?" "Stop leeching off me, you useless thing." For over 20 years, I believed I had devoted myself to my husband, Thomas. Yet, this is what Thomas really thought of me. I wasn't leeching off him. I was merely devoted to him. But I can't put these thoughts into words. As my strength drains away, he continues. "Now that Richard is a working adult, you've got no reason to leech off me, right?" "But..." "Quiet! I don't want to hear your excuses." He raises his voice. "Oh, I can't do this anymore. My feelings will never reach him." At that moment, I hear something snap inside me. It's the sound of the thread of love that connected our hearts, breaking. At the same time, my feelings for him begin to fade. We were husband and wife until just now, but now he feels like a stranger. He had been using me from the start. He never loved me. Otherwise, he wouldn't blatantly cheat and try to kick me out. I don't care what happens to such a man. No, I must bring him down thoroughly. With my mind made up, I lift my face and stare intently at him. "What? Got a complaint?" "None. If you want me out, then I'll leave as you wish." I slammed the living room door shut, heading to my room. But there was nothing of mine left. "Don't bother looking. I had the garbage collectors take everything away." "Which company did you use?" "The flyer is right there." "That's the one." I picked up the collector's flyer from the floor. As I called the number, I told him, "I'll make sure you regret this." Saying that, I left the house. Soon the call connected. I explained the situation, and they understood immediately. Apparently, they had sensed something off about his behavior. The garbage collectors had kept everything as it was when they picked it up. "I'll be there shortly." "Thank you." I thanked them politely and hung up. Afterward, I visited the collector's location. I expressed my gratitude and had them move my belongings to a newly rented storage unit. I was relieved to find my belongings safe. He shouldn't think I'll just let this go. Grinding my teeth, I called Richard. I briefly explained the situation and then said, "So, I've decided to move out, considering a divorce. Richard, prepare yourself, okay?" "Oh, okay. Bye." Richard quickly ended the call. He seemed scared of me. Was I that angry? I wondered, storing my mobile phone in my bag. Then I headed to a nearby business hotel. Actually, I had already decided where to move. The reason was simple. I was planning to discuss divorce with Thomas soon. Divorce and then move there. That was my plan for starting a new life. Well, it's just a bit earlier than planned. Honestly, I wasn't in trouble. It was just moving things forward by about 2 weeks. 2 weeks in a hotel. What a waste. Can't be helped. But as a housewife, I couldn't help but think it wasteful. Maybe I should bill him for this hotel stay? Well, whatever it is, brace yourself, Thomas. I muttered and then started working on my post-divorce plans. About 10 days into my stay at the business hotel, Thomas called me during lunch. As soon as I answered, Thomas raised his voice. "You took my money." "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb. It's about Dad's hospital bills. The hospital just called asking for payment." "Oh, that's what he's talking about." I sighed as I replied. "You should be the one paying, shouldn't you? I'm no longer related to this, having been kicked out." "You've been receiving living expenses from me. It should have been paid from there." "Yes, that's true. But isn't the debit card for that bank account with you now?" I retorted calmly. However, I knew there was no money in that bank account. That's why I couldn't stop laughing. "I have the debit card, but there's no money in it. That's why I'm saying you took it." "I didn't take anything." "Don't lie. Who else could use it?" Didn't he realize that he had transferred too little? I replied in disbelief. "It was just too little money from the start. If there's no money for the hospital bills, why not use your own allowance?" "Allowance?" He started to panic, visibly confused. It seemed he thought I was unaware. Since the beginning of our marriage, he had been giving me handwritten salary statements. It was to hide the fact that he was siphoning off a portion of his salary. In other words, the skimmed money was his allowance. I once asked Joseph about your salary. "How much is Thomas earning?" "So, that's..." He looked puzzled but told me. So, I knew about the skimmed money. As I told him, he fell silent. There was a long silence, making me wonder if the call had dropped. Then suddenly, he raised his voice. "What's wrong with using the money I earned? It's your fault for using up the money I gave you." Okay. So? "We're getting divorced. I'm going to demand compensation. You'll pay back the money you spent." At that, I sneered. Perfect timing, I had evidence. Now Thomas couldn't escape the truth. I responded with a smile. "Oh, thank you. I wanted to get divorced too. Come to my place for the divorce discussion." "What? No, but..." "You want to divorce, right? I've prepared evidence of your affair and am waiting." Though I couldn't see him, his voice sounded strained. "Evidence of an affair? What are you talking about?" "No use pretending. I have the evidence photos." "Evidence photos?" I could almost see him getting pale. Suppressing my laughter, I continued. "Then, I'll give you the address. Let's meet next Sunday to discuss in detail." I gave him the address of a certain location and quickly ended the call. I had successfully set up the divorce confrontation. Now, if only I could make him apologize. Honestly, that would be the trickiest part. I steeled myself for the upcoming meeting. On the promised Sunday. I was already at the meeting place before the scheduled time. I wondered when he would arrive. Looking around, I spotted Thomas in the corner of my eye. "Over here!" I waved and called out. He looked up, surprised. "Here?" "Yes. Didn't I give you the address?" "But, this place, whose mansion is it?" Thomas looked behind me. There stood a mansion worth about $1 million. Much larger than a normal house, with a garden. A 3-story building with a basement and a theater room. Luxury cars parked in the built-in garage. Pointing at the mansion, I said with a smile. "This is my house. It's newly built, so it's beautiful, right?" "Your house?" "Yes. I thought I'd live here after the divorce, so I started building it a while ago." Yes, the place I had called him to was my newly built house. Thomas, thinking of me as just a housewife, was understandably shocked. Pushing him from the back, I led him into the house. I guided him to the living room. "Let's start our discussion. This is my lawyer." I introduced my waiting lawyer. But Thomas was too distracted. Restless, his gaze never settled. He kept looking around, not even trying to see the evidence photos of his affair on the table. Also, he didn't respond when spoken to. Frankly, the discussion was unproductive. Eventually, he asked in a quiet mutter. "How did you afford this house?" While thinking, is that what you're curious about? I answered. I just bought it, normally. Liar. A housewife can't afford to buy a house. It's said that to buy a $1 million house, one needs an income of around $150,000 per year. But I have that kind of income. So, I answered calmly. I earn that much. Do you have a problem with that? No, but how? I started helping out at a friend's company, and before I knew it, things turned out like this. The story goes back a few years. When I decided to divorce during my father's hospitalization turmoil, I started preparing for it. The first thing I did was look for a job. I wouldn't be able to live without a job after the divorce. So, I searched for a job to sustain myself. But good jobs aren't easy to find. That's when I consulted my close friend Linda. Why don't you help me out with my work? What kind of work do you do? Aquaculture on land. Land-based aquaculture involves artificially creating facilities like pools for farming. There are downsides, of course, but it prevents ocean pollution. It's an eco-friendly type of farming. Linda's father started it, and now Linda had taken over. So, you had been working there? Thomas asked tentatively. After I started helping, the business began to thrive. I was mainly involved in negotiations and administrative work. Linda was grateful for my help, and eventually, I was promoted to an executive position. It was all coincidental, but I believe luck is part of one's capabilities. Hearing my story, he looked dejected. Then, after a moment of thought, he suddenly looked up. Okay. Let's pretend this divorce talk never happened. How about we start over? As he spoke nonsense, I coldly replied. Are you crazy? No, I genuinely want to start over with you. Thomas pleaded fervently. But seeing that he was only dazzled by my money, I retorted with a raised eyebrow. I refuse to be with someone who cheats. And someone who neglects Joseph. No, about my father. Enough. You don't know, but I was the one paying for Joseph's hospital bills. The money Thomas gave me was really just a little. After paying for food, utilities, and other expenses, there was usually nothing left, sometimes not even enough. He only gave me that much. Obviously, there was no way to pay Joseph's hospital bills with it. At first, I managed somehow, but later I paid them with my salary. And yet, you never listened to me or visited Joseph. Well, that's because I can't trust someone like that. I raised my voice, and he fell silent. Then, the lawyer discussed the compensation. Thomas couldn't say anything. He just kept his head down until the end. Eventually, prompted by the lawyer, Thomas signed the divorce papers. The compensation was set at $30,000. So, now that the divorce is settled, you'll pay Joseph's hospital bills. Ah. Thomas nodded reluctantly. At least he didn't argue. I felt relieved. Finally, I sent him away, as if chasing him out. It's over at last. The only regret was that he never apologized. But I had one last card to play. If I played it, he would apologize. Thinking that, a smile crept onto my face. A few days later, after leaving the company, someone called out to me from behind. Hey, Elizabeth! Turning around, I saw Thomas standing there. Don't address me so familiarly. We're divorced. Shut up! What did you do? He looked at me with an angry, red face. His reaction told me everything. Ah, he must have heard that news at the company. I smiled and responded. What do you think I did? Don't joke around. Tell me how you got me fired. He stomped his foot. His frustration amused me, and a smile escaped. Isn't it your own fault? Getting punished for having an affair with the office clerk? His affair partner was a clerk at his company. Apparently, he did whatever he wanted because he was the president. After deciding to divorce, I reported the matter to Joseph. While Joseph regretted our divorce, he was furious about Thomas's actions. When I showed him the affair evidence photos, Joseph became even more angry. Then he said to me, "I want to transfer all my company shares to you." To me? What about Thomas's brother? No, to you. Use them to dethrone Thomas from his position as president. That was Joseph's plan. His company is a corporation. For a president or any executive appointment, a shareholders' meeting resolution is necessary. Of course, it can also be decided by a board of directors resolution. However, Joseph's company isn't very large. He holds most of the issued shares. This means that as a shareholder, he could make decisions alone. But it's common for small company presidents to hold the majority of shares. If I inherited all of Joseph's shares, I could exercise the voting rights alone. Nevertheless, Thomas's dismissal wasn't my decision. I informed James about acquiring the shares, and only reported Thomas's affair. The rest was up to James' judgment. James was considerate. James, why would he do whatever you say? It's not about following my orders. It's about doing what's best for the company. As I said this, Thomas collapsed on the spot. Then, he began to mutter apologies. I was wrong. I'm sorry, please forgive me. I won't. If things stay this way, I'll have no job and be left destitute. That's not my concern. It's all his responsibility. I won't forgive you even if you apologize. Please! Forgive me! I'm begging you! He apologized profoundly right there. I turned my back. Sorry, but there's nothing I can do. Why not? If you own the shares. I sold them to James and his wife. I don't want anything to do with you anymore. At that moment, I heard his sobbing. Of course, I pretended not to hear and walked away. After his dismissal as president, Thomas had to leave the company. He might have stayed if he had been an employee or a working director. But Thomas was arrogant, having joined the company through Joseph's referral. I refused to be an employee. He even said that. So, when he was dismissed, he was kicked out immediately. Now he's working a part-time job at a grocery store, but re-employment at his age is difficult. He's likely to spend his old age in regret and without money. As for me, being divorced allowed me to focus more on my work. There's no talk of remarriage, but I have a few male colleagues. Spring might come again for me. I was thinking about this when Richard called. I'll bring my girlfriend over sometime. That's great. I'm looking forward to it. I failed in marriage, but I don't want Richard to. But I'm sure he'll be fine. Richard is much more sensible than me.